Today, as some of you would know, there was a glitch in the recording. I have no idea what happened, but all of a sudden, as I explained yesterday, when I went on actually later on and explained what had happened, there was a glitch in the streaming service. And for some reason, for about a minute or so, it just cut me out. No sound, no vision. I thought the sound was still on. I kept talking, but apparently it wasn't. It cuts out both sound and vision. My apologies. And if you want to blame anybody, blame the streaming service or technology. You know, technology is wonderful when it works. And then when it doesn't work, well, we become so dependent on it that we have to make these major changes. Sometimes it's funny. I mean, in a way, it's funny. In a way, it isn't. But I was just listening to the fact that last week, and maybe even this week, a company that supplies a lot of the technology to car companies, and especially dealerships and associated ones, like the ones who do repairs and oil change, all the rest of it. There was a big hack last week. And in order to sell cars, guess what? The dealerships had to actually go back down and start physically handwriting receipts for customers. So that's kind of the funny side of it, that at least we still remember how to do that. Hopefully, we still remember how to do that. And occasionally we still write, but that's another story. Hope it didn't inconvenience you too much. And if you didn't listen to the whole thing and you thought it had stopped and gone and that was the end of it, well, go back and look at it again, because there is another piece at the end there. And there's a bit in the middle. And I don't remember exactly what I said in the middle. But anyway, the rest of it is there. Today's reading is called Bold Caring, and I've changed it. As I mentioned before, I've changed it. Why? Why did I change it? Because this reading, and quite a few of these readings this month, are written primarily for and directed at the New Thought community in general and the Science of Mind community in particular. But I really know that a lot of people who watch this are not members of New Thought. They're not members of Science of Mind. Some of them are religious, some are spiritual, some are humanistic. And therefore, I try and change these readings so that they suit anybody. So you'll see in the affirmation, I've actually put parts of it in parentheses so that anybody can use it. Enough of that from me. First quote is from Daniel Hill Williams. He lived from just into the second half of the 19th century and for about 2/3 of the first half of the 20th century. He was African American. He was one of the first. He was, I think, the first African American heart surgeon. He also opened the first hospital that was not segregated, and he opened a nursing school as well for African Americans. And he says, "A people who don't make provisions for their own sick and suffering are not worthy of civilization. A people who don't make provisions for their own sick and suffering are not worthy of civilization." You can take this in lots of ways, depending where you lie on the political spectrum. I grew up with universal health care. Apparently, when I was born, I don't think it existed, but anyway, it may have, I'm not sure. Well, bottom line is, I grew up with universal health care. So when I came to the US and found out I tried to find out all the intricacies of getting insurance, getting care, and so on and so forth, it was a bit of a shock. First time I used a chiropractor, I thought my insurance covered it. Well, it did for about a half a dozen treatments, and then it stopped, and I had to start paying myself. Well, I wasn't used to that. It was just outside of my frame of reference. Even when I worked for an American oil company, Aramco, and as it was then in the Middle East, everything was taken care of. Aramco covered you medically completely. You didn't need insurance because they took care of everything. They had their own doctors, nurses, hospitals, the whole thing. So my view on this probably doesn't align with most people's, but I think that everybody in every country has a right to healthcare, that we take care of our own people. The second quote, he says, once again, a reminder, a people who don't make provisions for their own sick and suffering are not worthy of civilization. Daniel Hale Williams. And Ernest Holmes, in a Holmes Reader on Practical Wisdom, says this: compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in a mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the most gentle of all human virtues, for it is the outpouring of the divine givingness through all, or if you like, the outpouring of life through all. And I do believe that when the Dalai Lama was asked what his religion was, well, he's a Buddhist. We pretty well all know that. He said that his religion was compassion. And if you ask him what to do, he will say, practice compassion. If you want to be happy for others, practice compassion. If you want to be happy for yourself, practice compassion. And this is from Reverend Raymond. He says, it's not clear who exactly first asked or first said, quote, the measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members. The measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members. He goes on to say, no matter the author, the words ring true. It reminds me of the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Are we not all someone's children? Well, are we not all part of the village of humanity? Why then are we not doing more to care for those in need? He says we cannot claim to practice science of mind or any other positive philosophy, I would say, while actively ignoring the needs of others. How can our apathy and indifference to any human being be a demonstration of this amazing metaphysical or any other positive liberation theology that we study, practice, teach, and live? So in other words, any philosophy that uplifts humankind. How many people in our secular and spiritual communities feel the sting of isolation, loneliness, and abandonment? We move through our days barely speaking to each other and avoiding eye contact due to fear. A little bit about this later. We must eliminate our silos so that we can return to the oneness that community offers. A little bit more about this shortly. We must create communities in which we care for those in need. So powerful can this caring communal energy be that it infects all areas of culture and society, so that all of humankind is cared for without hesitation. As Chief Seattle said, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. So the message is really pretty simple. What Reverend Raymond is saying to us, and the people from whom he's quoted are saying, is we have a responsibility to care for everyone in our society. In other words, we should support looking after everyone. When we're in a village, and we all at one time or another, if we go back far enough, we're part of a village community. When we were in the village cared for all its people. If they were sick, it helped them. If they needed something, they were short of it, it helped them. If there was a food shortage, they shared it. So in other words, we need to get back to that mindset that says that we are all integrated, we're all part of each other. There is no true separation. The separation is only apparent. It isn't real. And there's lots and lots of examples I could quote, and probably some of you could quote, that shows that we're all interconnected. I've mentioned different examples in the past. The one I like to mention most is when I play wordscapes, which I've not been playing much recently, by the way. I'll be putting a word in, and the person on the television that my wife's watching is saying that exact same word at that exact same time. Or like when my grandson, when I was thinking about wormholes, and I'm a science fiction, science fantasy nut, so I think about things like wormholes. He just out of the blue said to me, "Oh, I want some wormhole." There is this interconnection that we've kind of lost. And at the village community level, they still have it. They still have got this sense of they're all part of one family. And we know, I mean, we absolutely know from experiments carried out, studies, that community is incredibly, incredibly important. And maybe one of the reasons why the blue zones, you know, that where there's a big proportion or an extraordinary proportion of people living into their hundreds, we know that community is a huge aspect. Food is an aspect, yes. Keeping busy is an aspect, but community is also a really essential part of it. So maybe the first thing we can do is to start thinking in terms of community, you know, thinking in terms of how we're parts of different communities. So whatever community you're part of, be in it wholeheartedly. You know, whether it's the photography club, it's an art club, it's our spiritual center, it's your church, you know, it's your men's group, your women's group, it's the art league, whatever it is, Toastmasters, Chamber of Commerce, mediation like I do. All these are incredibly important to make us feel wanted. And when we start getting back to that mindset of the fact that we're all one and we start doing it on a small level and then build out into a bigger level, the world will automatically be a better place. I personally believe that we're all entitled to universal health care. Is it expensive? Yes. But let's put it this way. Most parts of the world where you can get good medical treatment, the cost is a fraction of what it costs in the States. So maybe the first place we have to look is how we apportion these costs. For instance, why should you pay 100 times more for a drug in the US than you do in India? The drug companies will tell you that it's because it costs all this money for research. But there's got to be a way to spread the cost out more evenly. Our medical costs are out of control, in my opinion. They're way, way, way more than they are in most of the parts of the world. Are doctors worth paying for? Yes, they are. However, there's got to be some proportionality. There's got to be some place where we say, this is a reasonable pay for doing this job, and then the rest is too much. It's just like CEOs. People argue CEOs are paid way too much. Well, I don't know. I've not done the analysis on it. Just looking at the bare facts, it would seem to me that the CEO being paid 100,000 times more than some of his workers or her workers doesn't seem reasonable. They're doing a job looking after the whole company. They're steering the ship. But without all the workers, there wouldn't be a ship to steer. As we've often said in the past, who would you miss first at work for a week? The CEO or the janitor? And it doesn't take a genius to figure out who you would miss first. You know, when all the garbage starts piling up, you would think, where are the janitors, right? Let me see. I need to change the affirmation. The saying affirmation he gave us can apply to anybody. I do what is mine to be a beneficial presence to others. I do what is mine to be a beneficial presence to others. I live, move, and have my being as a good Samaritan. Or if you're part of New Thought, I live, move, and have my being as a 21st century New Thought Good Samaritan. You pick which applies to you. You know, you don't have to go to extremes with these affirmations. You can just read them and think about them and think, well, how does that apply to me? If you use it as a true affirmation and start repeating it, well, that's really your choice. Obviously, you're not going to repeat all of these. we give you 28, 29, 30, 31 every month, depending on the month and the year. Nobody's expecting you to use them, but find the ones that work for you and then use them. And I think that's a pretty good idea. Oh, and going back to the idea about, he says, where does he say here? How many people in our secular and spiritual communities feel the sting of isolation, loneliness, and abandonment? We move through our days barely speaking to people and avoiding eye contact due to fear. I think it depends where you are. You know, certainly there are places where it pays to do that because it can be dangerous, but by and large, why don't we practice a little bit more each day making eye contact? And you know the first person to make eye contact with? It's yourself. Every day, at least once a day, and preferably 3 times a day, look in the mirror and tell yourself how much you love yourself. It's simple, but it's not easy. Trust me, I mean it. So the first person to look in the eye, in my humble opinion, is yourself. And then start looking into the eyes of others and see them as human beings just like you are and worthy of respect. That's all I got, except to say Reverend Lisa will be on tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. She is wading through this tome called The Science of the Mind textbook. Good luck to her. It's probably not something I would have wanted to do, so I appreciate her doing that. And as I said, I'll be back tomorrow around about 5. And until then, take care of yourself and tell yourself how much you are a worthy person and tell yourself that you love yourself. Until next time, namaste.